I never imagined that at my husband's funeral, I would receive a message that would shatter everything I believed about my family. That single text changed my 66-year-old world forever and led me down a path of discovery so horrifying that even now, years later, I sometimes wonder if it was all a nightmare. My name is Margot Hayes. For 42 years, I shared my life with Ernest, a gentle man who repaired bicycles in our small town of Spring Creek. We weren't wealthy, but we were rich in love. We raised 2 sons, Charles and Henry, giving them everything we could. I thought we had built a beautiful family. I was wrong. The morning of Ernest's funeral was gray and silent. Standing beside his casket, watching my sons Charles and Henry with their composed faces and calculated tears, I felt something was off. Their grief seemed rehearsed, their embraces hollow. But grief plays tricks on the mind, or so I thought. Then my phone buzzed. An unknown number. The message made my blood freeze. "I'm still alive." "That's not me in the coffin." My hands trembling, I typed back, "Who is this?" The response came immediately. "I can't reveal myself. They're watching. Don't trust our sons." I stared at Charles and Henry, searching their faces for any sign of the truth. They stood there in their expensive suits, looking appropriately sorrowful, but something in their eyes seemed cold, calculating. How had my loving sons become these strangers? Let me take you back to the beginning, to understand how love can transform into such devastating betrayal. Ernest and I met when I was 24, both of us poor but hopeful. I cleaned houses to support my ailing mother, while he inherited his father's small bicycle repair shop. Our courtship began when he offered to fix a bike I didn't even own, just so I could have an excuse to talk to him. That conversation under the old oak tree in Town Square Park blossomed into a love that sustained us through decades of hardship. Our early years were challenging. We lived in a modest house with a leaky tin roof, setting out pots during rainstorms to catch the drips. But we were happy. Ernest worked tirelessly in his shop while I sewed clothes for the town's women. When Charles arrived, followed by Henry 2 years later, our joy seemed complete. I devoted myself to those boys. I fed them, clothed them, comforted their fears, and celebrated their successes. Ernest was an ideal father, taking them fishing on Sundays, teaching them to work with their hands, reading bedtime stories. We sacrificed our own needs for theirs, believing we were building something precious. As the boys grew older, however, changes began to emerge. Charles, the elder, developed an ambition that seemed to shame him of our simple life. He questioned why we lived so modestly, why we couldn't afford luxuries like other families. Henry, as always, followed his brother's lead. When Charles turned 18, Ernest offered him a position at the shop. Charles's rejection was brutal. "I don't want to dirty my hands like you, Dad. I'm going to be somebody important." Those words wounded Ernest deeply, though he never admitted it to me. I'd find him sitting on the porch at night, staring at the stars with profound sadness. Despite my concerns, both sons eventually found success in business. Charles landed a real estate position in the city, and Henry followed suit. They began earning more money than Ernest and I had ever seen. Initially, I felt proud. My boys had achieved what we never could, escaping poverty to build better lives. But success changed them. Visits became infrequent. Phone calls grew brief. When they did come home, they arrived in expensive vehicles, wearing costly suits, speaking about investments and properties with an air that mixed pity and embarrassment when looking at us. "Mom," Charles said during one of his rare visits, "you and Dad should move somewhere better. This house is falling apart." He wasn't wrong, but that house contained all our memories. It was where we'd raised our family, shared countless meals, grown old together. It wasn't fancy, but it was our home. Ernest, with his usual wisdom, would tell me, "Margot, money has changed our boys. We're no longer enough for them." I resisted believing it, making excuses for their absence, their broken promises, their coldness. But Ernest was right. We had lost our sons long before I lost my husband. The change became more dramatic when Charles married Jasmine Albright, a city woman who never hid her disdain for our lifestyle. During her first visit, she arrived in high heels that sank into our dirt porch and an elegant dress that cost more than everything I owned. Pleased to meet you, she said with a forced smile, barely extending her fingertips in greeting. Her eyes surveyed our humble home with an expression that made me feel insignificant. During dinner, Jasmine barely touched the meal I'd prepared with such care. She pushed the meatloaf around her plate, cutting tiny pieces but eating almost nothing. Charles seemed nervous, constantly apologizing for things he'd never been ashamed of before. Next time we'll take them to a restaurant, he whispered to Jasmine, thinking I couldn't hear. But I heard every word, and each one pierced my heart. Henry remained single but adopted the same distant attitude. His visits were limited to special occasions, and even then, he seemed eager to leave. He was constantly on his phone, closing deals even during our conversations. "Mom, I have to go," became his standard farewell. "I have an important meeting tomorrow morning." Family Sundays became memories. Christmases grew cold and formal. My sons brought expensive gifts we didn't need, stayed for a few hours, then left with obvious relief. Ernest and I aged alone, comforting each other. "You know what's saddest, Margot?" Ernest said one evening as we drank coffee on the porch. "It's not that they have money. It's that money has made them believe we don't matter anymore." He was right. My sons hadn't just changed financially. They'd changed in their hearts. We were no longer their beloved parents. We'd become an uncomfortable reminder of a past they wanted to forget. Things worsened when Charles purchased a $200,000 house in an exclusive city neighborhood. Henry soon followed, investing in a luxury condo worth $150,000. Suddenly, our sons possessed fortunes we couldn't comprehend. "You should sell this place and move to a retirement community," Jasmine suggested during one of her infrequent visits. "There are lovely facilities for people your age. You'd be more comfortable." Retirement community. After 40 years of building our home, after raising these sons with such love, they wanted to send us to an institution. "We don't need a home," Ernest replied with characteristic dignity. "We're fine here." But I saw the expressions on Charles and Henry's faces. They supported Jasmine's idea. To them, we'd become burdens to be solved as conveniently as possible. More direct suggestions followed. Charles arrived one day with documents he'd prepared without consulting us. "Dad, Mom," he said with his perfected artificial smile, "I've been considering your future. This house is worth maybe $50,000. If you sell it, I can contribute additional funds so you can move somewhere better." To us, no place was better than the home where we'd been happy for decades. But Charles didn't understand. For him, everything reduced to numbers, to monetary value. "Besides," he continued, "I think Dad should retire from the shop. He's 70 now. Time to rest." Ernest looked at him with infinite sadness. "Son, working isn't a burden for me. It's what keeps me alive, gives meaning to my days." "But you could get hurt," Henry insisted, supporting his brother as always. "At your age, an accident would be very dangerous." Their words sounded caring, but I sensed something darker beneath them, an impatience, an urgency I couldn't fully grasp. The following months were tense. My sons increased pressure for us to sell the house. They brought real estate agents without warning. They had it appraised without permission. They spoke about what would be best for everyone. "Look," Charles said during one particularly uncomfortable dinner, "Jasmine and I plan to have children soon. We'll need help with expenses. If you sell the house and move somewhere smaller, that money could be an early inheritance." Early inheritance. He was requesting our inheritance while we were still alive. The audacity left me speechless. Ernest remained calm, but I saw his jaw tighten. "Son, when your mother and I die, everything we have will be yours. But while we're alive, our decisions are our own." "Don't be stubborn," Henry cut in with harshness I'd never seen from him. "You're old now. You can't keep living in the past." That night, after they left, Ernest and I talked until dawn. For the first time in our marriage, we discussed the possibility that our sons weren't the people we thought we'd raised. "Something's wrong, Margot," my husband said with worry I'd never seen in his eyes. "This isn't just ambition or impatience. There's something darker behind all this pressure." I had no idea how profoundly correct his words were. I couldn't imagine that my own sons were planning something that would destroy our lives forever. The last normal conversation I had with Charles occurred 3 weeks before Ernest's death. He came alone without Jasmine, looking more serious than usual. "Mom," he said, sitting at the kitchen table where he'd eaten breakfast countless times as a child, "I want you to know that whatever happens, Henry and I will always take care of you." His words comforted me then, but remembering them now beside Ernest's grave, they send chills down my spine. Why did he say whatever happens? What did he know that I didn't? The accident that changed everything occurred on a Tuesday morning. Ernest had left early for the shop, as he'd done every day for over 40 years. I was preparing his favorite lunch, meatloaf and mashed potatoes, when the phone rang with urgency that chilled me. "Mrs. Hayes?" an unfamiliar voice asked. "I'm calling from Memorial Hospital. Your husband has been in a serious accident. You need to come immediately." The words blurred in my mind. The world stopped. My legs weakened and I grabbed the door frame to prevent falling. What happened? Is he okay? Is he alive? "Ma'am, please come as quickly as possible." The hospital trip was a hazy nightmare. My neighbor Doris had to drive because I was shaking too violently to hold the keys. Throughout the journey, my mind refused to process what was happening. Ernest was careful, meticulous in his work. How could this have occurred? When we reached the hospital, Charles and Henry were already there. This surprised me because no one had notified them yet, at least not me. But in my desperation, I didn't focus on that detail. "Mom," Charles said, embracing me with seemingly genuine force, "Dad's in bad shape. The doctors say one of the shop machines exploded. He has severe burns and traumatic brain injury." Henry's eyes were red, but something in his expression felt wrong. He seemed more nervous than sad, like someone awaiting important news rather than grieving for his father. "Can we see him?" I asked desperately. "Only immediate family, one at a time for 5 minutes maximum," the nurse explained. When I entered the ICU room, my heart sank. Ernest was connected to dozens of machines, bandages covering most of his face and arms. I barely recognized him. His breathing was labored, artificial, maintained by constantly beeping machines. I approached his bed and took his hand, the only part of his body that seemed intact. "Ernest, my love, I'm here. Everything will be fine. You're going to recover like you always do." For a moment, I felt a slight squeeze in my hand. His eyes moved behind closed lids. He was fighting. My warrior was fighting to return to me. The next 3 days were the longest of my life. I practically lived at the hospital, sleeping in uncomfortable waiting room chairs. Charles and Henry took turns accompanying me, but they seemed more interested in speaking with doctors than comforting their father. I overheard fragmented conversations I couldn't fully understand then. Henry asked about medical insurance treatment costs. Charles was on the phone discussing life insurance policies and beneficiaries. "Mom," Charles said on the second day, "we reviewed Dad's insurance. He has a $50,000 life insurance policy. There's also workers' compensation that could cover up to $75,000 more." Why was he discussing money while Ernest was fighting for his life? Why was he worried about insurance instead of his father's recovery? "I don't care about money," I responded harshly. "I just want your father to get better." "Of course, Mom," he said, but I saw something in his eyes I didn't like, a coldness, a calculator working while his father lay dying. On the third day, doctors delivered the most devastating news of my life. Dr. Patterson, an older man with a compassionate expression, gathered us in a small office. "Mrs. Hayes," he began softly, "your husband's condition is critical. The burns have become infected, and the head trauma is more severe than initially thought. We must be realistic about his chances." "What does that mean?" I asked, though my heart already knew. "It means we need to prepare for the worst. Your husband is in an induced coma. We could keep him alive indefinitely, but his quality of life, well, it's highly unlikely he'll ever regain consciousness." My world collapsed. 42 years of marriage, an entire life built together, fading away like smoke. "We want to try everything," I said through sobs. No matter the cost, no matter how long it takes. But Charles exchanged a look with Henry that deeply disturbed me. Mom, Charles said in a voice attempting understanding, we have to be practical. Dad wouldn't want to live like this. He always said he never wanted to be a burden on anyone. A burden. I exploded with fury I didn't know I possessed. He's your father. He's not a burden. He's the man who raised you, who worked his entire life to give you the best he could. We know, Mom, Henry chimed in, but we also have to think about you. The medical bills will be enormous. They could wipe out all your savings. Again, money. Always money. My husband was dying and they were calculating costs. That night, alone in the hospital room, I took Ernest's hand and spoke as if he could hear me. My love, I don't know what to do. The doctors say there's no hope, but I can't let you go. I can't imagine life without you. Then something happened that still gives me chills. His fingers moved slightly, squeezing mine with barely perceptible force. His lips moved as if trying to speak, but no sound emerged. I called for nurses desperately. He's reacting. He's trying to talk. But by the time they arrived, Ernest had returned to his previous state. The nurse checked monitors and shook her head. Sometimes there are involuntary muscle spasms, ma'am. It doesn't mean he's conscious. But I knew what I'd felt. Ernest had tried to communicate something important to me. 2 days later, in the early Friday morning hours, machine alarms sounded. Lights flashed. Nurses rushed to Ernest's room. I was dozing in the hallway when the noise awakened me. No, no, no. I screamed, running toward the room. Doctors worked for 40 minutes trying to resuscitate him, but it was useless. At 4:37 a.m., Ernest was officially declared dead. The pain I felt was physical, as if my heart had been torn from my chest. I collapsed beside his bed, embracing his still warm body, refusing to accept he was gone forever. Charles and Henry arrived at the hospital an hour after their father's death. They seemed prepared, as if they'd been expecting the call. They brought papers, documents, phone numbers for funeral homes. We already contacted Spring Creek Funeral Home, Charles told me while I was still crying inconsolably. They can collect the body this morning. We also contacted the insurance, Henry added. The claim process is already underway. How could they be so efficient, so organized, so cold just 1 hour after losing their father? Something was wrong. But my grief was so intense I couldn't think clearly. The funeral was scheduled for the following Monday. Charles handled all arrangements without really consulting me. He chose the simplest casket, the shortest service, as if wanting to finish everything as quickly as possible. It's what Dad would have wanted, he said when I complained about being excluded from decisions. Something simple without fuss. But Ernest deserved better than this indecent rush to bury and forget him. The funeral day arrived cloudy and cold, as if the sky itself were mourning Ernest. I wore my only black dress, the same one from my mother's funeral years earlier. My hand shook so much that Doris had to help button the small buttons on the back. "Be strong, Margot," my dear friend whispered while carefully combing my hair. "Ernest would want to see you strong." But I didn't feel strong. I felt empty, like a shell without a soul. 42 years of marriage couldn't be buried so easily. At the cemetery, I was surprised by how few people attended. I expected more of Ernest's coworkers, more neighbors, more acquaintances. But there were only Charles, Henry, Jasmine, Doris, myself, and the pastor. For a man who'd lived 70 years in the same town, who'd helped so many people, the funeral seemed strangely empty. "Where are the guys from the shop?" I asked Charles. "We didn't want to bother anyone," he replied quickly. "Dad was private. He would have preferred something intimate." But that wasn't true. Ernest loved his community, cared about neighbors. He would have wanted them to say goodbye. Why had Charles made everything so secretive, so rushed? During the service, I observed my sons with strange emotional detachment. Charles had a solemn expression appropriate for the occasion, but his eyes constantly darted to his watch. Henry seemed restless, as if he had more important things to do. Jasmine discreetly checked her phone behind her black veil. This was how they were saying goodbye to their father with impatience and distractions. When it came time to throw dirt on the casket, my legs refused to support me. Doris had to hold me up as I sobbed uncontrollably. The sound of dirt hitting wood was final, conclusive, hopeless. At that exact moment, standing by my husband's grave, my phone vibrated. A text from an unknown number. "I'm alive. That's not me in the casket." My heart stopped. The letters danced before my eyes as if I were hallucinating. With trembling hands, I replied, "Who are you?" The answer came immediately. "I can't say. They're watching. Don't trust our sons." The phone fell from my hands as if it were burning. Doris bent to retrieve it, but I stopped her abruptly. I couldn't let anyone else see those messages. Not until I understood what was happening. "Are you okay, Mom?" Charles asked, approaching with worried expression. I stared at him, trying to find clues on his face. His eyes seemed sincere, but now every gesture, word, expression felt suspicious. "I'm fine," I lied, putting the phone in my purse. "I just need to go home." On the way back, I couldn't get those messages out of my head. Was it possible someone was playing a cruel joke at the worst moment of my life? Or was there really a possibility that Ernest was alive? But if he was alive, who had we buried? And if he wasn't alive, who knew enough details about our lives to write something so specific about our sons? That night, alone in my house, which now felt like a tomb, I reviewed every detail of recent days. Ernest's accident had been strange from the beginning. According to Charles, a machine had exploded in the shop, but Ernest knew every screw and wire in that place. He was meticulous about maintenance, obsessive about safety. Plus, how had my sons reached the hospital so quickly if no one had notified them? The hospital had called me first. I was the emergency contact. How did they know about the accident before I did? And then there was the money. From day one, Charles and Henry had discussed insurance policies and beneficiaries, as if they'd been waiting for this moment, preparing for it. I decided to check Ernest's papers. In his old wooden desk, he kept all important documents in a metal box. Insurance policies, house deed, shop documents, everything was there. I found the $50,000 life insurance policy Charles had mentioned, but there was something I didn't remember. The policy had been updated just 6 months earlier, increasing coverage from $25,000 to $50,000. Why had Ernest increased his life insurance? He'd never mentioned that change, and more importantly, who had suggested he do it? I kept searching and found something even more disturbing: a workers' compensation policy I didn't know about, purchased just 2 months before his death. $75,000 for accidental death on the job. $125,000 total. A fortune for a family like ours, but also a fortune tempting enough for someone without scruples. My phone vibrated again. Another message from the same unknown number. "Check the bank account. See who's been moving money." This time I didn't hesitate. This person, whoever they were, knew too much to be a prankster. They knew about insurance, about my sons, details only someone very close to us could know. The next day, I went to the bank where Ernest and I had maintained our account for 30 years. Mrs. Thompson, the manager who'd known us forever, greeted me with sincere condolences. "Margot, I'm so sorry about Ernest. He was a good man." "Thank you. I came to check our accounts. I need to understand our financial situation." She showed me bank statements from the last 6 months. What I saw froze me. Over the past 3 months, large withdrawals had been made from our savings account. $2,000 in January, $5,000 in February, $8,000 in March. Money I didn't know had been moved. Who authorized these withdrawals? I asked, voice trembling. "Your husband came in person," Mrs. Thompson explained. "He said he needed money for shop repairs. But I kept household accounts. I knew exactly how much money we had and what we spent. Ernest had never mentioned expensive repairs, and we definitely never discussed withdrawing thousands from savings. Do you have signatures for those withdrawals?" She showed me receipts. Indeed, it looked like Ernest's signature, but something about the handwriting seemed off. Too shaky, too uncertain for his usually firm, clear script. "Mrs. Thompson," I asked with pounding heart, Did he come alone to make these withdrawals or was someone with him? She thought for a moment. Now that you mention it, I think he came with one of your sons once or twice. Charles, I believe. He said he was helping his dad with paperwork because Ernest had trouble reading documents without glasses. Charles. My son had been involved in money withdrawals I didn't know about, using his father's tired eyes as excuse. But Ernest saw perfectly well with his glasses, which he never removed during the day. That afternoon, reviewing bank receipts repeatedly, I received another message. The insurance was their idea. They convinced Ernest he needed more protection for you. It was a trap. I could no longer deny evidence accumulating before me. The mysteriously increased insurance policies, unauthorized money withdrawals, Charles's presence in transactions I knew nothing about, his suspicious efficiency organizing the funeral, his coldness during his father's agony. But the question that terrified me: if they'd really planned Ernest's death, how had they done it, and who was sending these messages? How did this person know so much about what had happened? The following days became a nightmare of doubt and suspicion. Every one of Charles's smiles, every one of Henry's hugs, every word of condolence felt like a mask hiding something sinister. But I needed more proof before accepting a truth as horrible as what was taking shape in my mind. My phone kept receiving messages from the mysterious number. Go to Ernest's shop. Look in his desk. There are things you didn't see. I decided to visit the shop for the first time since the accident. Charles had said a machine exploded. But when I arrived, I found something completely different from expected. The shop was strangely clean, too clean to have been the scene of an explosion. There were no burn marks on walls, no debris, no signs of destruction such a serious accident should have caused. Where's the machine that exploded? I asked aloud. I searched the entire shop and found every machine in place, working perfectly. The welder, compressor, electric saw, all were intact. What then had caused the accident? In Ernest's desk, I found something that chilled me. A note in his handwriting, dated 3 days before his death. Charles insists I need more insurance. He says it's for Margot. But something doesn't feel right. I don't trust his intentions. Below that note was another. Henry brought papers to sign. He says they're to modernize the shop, but I don't understand what it's about. Why all the hurry? My husband had had suspicions. He'd intuited our son's evil intentions but died before he could tell me. I kept searching and found an envelope sealed with my name. I opened it with trembling hands. It was a letter from Ernest. My dearest Margot, if you're reading this, something has happened to me. In recent months, I've noticed strange changes in Charles and Henry. They're too interested in our money, insurance, us selling the house. Jasmine is putting pressure on them. Yesterday, Charles told me I should be more concerned about safety because at my age, any accident could be fatal. I don't know why, but those words sounded like a threat. I love you, Margot. If something happens to me, don't trust anyone blindly, not even our sons. The letter fell from my hands. Ernest had sensed his own death. He'd seen signs that I, blinded by maternal love, had ignored. That night, Charles came to visit. He arrived with wine and a smile that now seemed completely fake. Mom, I've been thinking about your future, he said, pouring himself a glass without asking if I wanted one. The insurance money it's already processing. It'll be $125,000. How do you know the exact amount? I asked, feigning innocence. Well, I helped Dad with insurance paperwork. He wanted to make sure you had enough money to live comfortably. A lie. Ernest had never wanted to increase insurance. According to his own note, he'd been pressured by Charles. And what do you think I should do with that money? His eyes lit up with a glint that chilled me. You could buy a smaller, cozier house, or even better, move into a nice retirement community where you'd have company and medical care. Henry and I could manage your money to make it grow. Manage my money? We just want to take care of you, Mom. At your age, it's easy to get scammed or make bad financial decisions. We know about investments business. We could triple that amount in a few years. Triple my money or make it disappear into their own pockets. Let me think about it, I said, trying to buy time. Of course, he said with fake sweetness. But not too long. For your own good. After he left, I sat in my kitchen, shaking with rage and fear. My own sons, my flesh and blood, had not only murdered their father but were now planning to steal everything I had left. That night, my phone vibrated with a longer message than others. Tomorrow, go to the police station. Ask for the report on Ernest's accident. There are contradictions you need to know about. The next day, I went to the local police station. Sergeant O'Connell, who'd known Ernest for years, greeted me kindly. The report on your husband's accident? He asked with confused expression. What accident, Mrs. Hayes? From his shop. When the machine exploded. The sergeant checked his files and shook his head. We don't have any report of an explosion at Ernest's shop. In fact, we don't have any report of a work accident involving your husband. I felt the world sway beneath my feet. But my son said it was a shop accident. That's why he was in the hospital. Mrs. Hayes, your husband arrived at the hospital Tuesday morning, but not from a work accident. According to the medical report I have here, he arrived unconscious with symptoms of poisoning. Poisoning? The doctors found traces of methanol in his blood, sufficient quantity to cause blindness, brain damage, and eventually death. The hospital should have informed you about this poisoning. It hadn't been an explosion. It hadn't been a work accident. Someone had deliberately poisoned my husband. Why didn't anyone tell me this? I asked, voice breaking. The immediate family who signed hospital papers requested information be kept confidential to avoid unnecessary speculation. They said you were too emotionally fragile to handle technical details. The immediate family, Charles and Henry, had hidden the true cause of Ernest's condition, invented the explosion story, and manipulated everyone, including me, to cover up a murder. Mrs. Hayes, the sergeant continued, if you suspect the circumstances of your husband's death, we could open a formal investigation. I had more than suspicions. I was certain my own sons had murdered their father for money. That afternoon, Henry came home with flowers and the same fake smile as Charles. How are you, Mom? You look tired. I'm fine, I lied, observing his every gesture from a new perspective. Just thinking about the future. That's good. Charles and I have been talking. We think you should sell the house soon while the real estate market's fresh. Why the rush? Well, old houses lose value quickly and you need liquidity. Funeral expenses, pending medical bills. More lies. The funeral had been cheap, almost insultingly so, and there were no pending medical bills because hospital insurance had covered them. Henry, I said, looking him directly in the eyes, you knew your dad didn't die from a work accident, didn't you? For a fraction of a second, I saw panic in his expression, but he recovered quickly. What are you talking about, Mom? I went to the police station. There's no report of an explosion at your dad's shop. This time the panic was more evident. Mom, you shouldn't be doing things like that. They'll confuse you. The grief is affecting you. The grief is affecting me, or you've been lying to me? He got up abruptly, spilling the coffee I'd poured for him. I think you need to rest. We'll talk when you're calmer. He left quickly, but not before making a phone call from the porch. Although I couldn't hear words, the tone was urgent, worried. That night, I received the most revealing message yet. They're coming together tomorrow. They'll try to convince you that you're crazy, that grief is making you imagine things. Don't believe them, and don't take anything they offer you to eat or drink. The mysterious message's prediction came true exactly as warned. The next day, Charles and Henry arrived together at my house, accompanied by Jasmine. They had expressions of exaggerated concern and a bag of pastries from the downtown bakery. Mom, we're so worried about you, Charles began in a sugary voice. Neighbors have told us you've been acting strange. Doris says you've been talking to yourself, that you're not eating well. Doris had never said that. It was just another lie in their growing collection. Jasmine brought your favorite pastries, Henry added, pointing to the bag. And we made special coffee from that brand you like so much. I remembered the message's words. Don't take anything they offer you to eat or drink. It was possible they were planning to poison me too, just as they had Ernest. Thank you, but I already had breakfast, I said, keeping my distance. But Mom, Jasmine insisted with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, you need to eat properly. You've lost a lot of weight since Dad Ernest died. I'm fine, I repeated firmly. Charles exchanged a significant look with Henry, the same look they'd shared at the hospital when the doctor gave us Ernest's prognosis. Mom, Charles said, sitting closer to me, we want to talk to you about something important. Henry and I have been consulting with some doctors about your recent behavior. My behavior? Yes. The strange questions you've been asking, visits to the police station, that obsession with irrelevant details about Dad. It's normal after such a great loss, but it can be dangerous if untreated. Henry nodded gravely. We spoke to Dr. Albright. He says it's common for older people to develop paranoia after losing a partner, especially women your age. Paranoia. They were accusing me of being crazy for uncovering their lies. I am not paranoid, I said with all the firmness I could muster. I'm just asking questions I should have asked from the beginning. What questions? Charles challenged me. Like why there's no police report for your father's supposed accident. Like why the shop is perfectly clean if there was an explosion. Like why you withdrew $15,000 from our account without telling me anything. The silence that followed was deafening. All three exchanged looks of thinly disguised panic. Mom, Henry finally said, those things have simple explanations. Dad withdrew that money for repairs he wanted to do in secret as a surprise for you. What surprise? He wanted to remodel the house, Charles lied. He'd hired workers to fix the roof and paint walls. He wanted it to be a surprise for your birthday. If that were true, where were the workers? Where were the materials? Why did no one in town know about this supposed remodeling? And about the police report, Charles continued. Not all work accidents require a report, especially when they happen on private property. More lies. Sergeant O'Connell had been very clear. Any work accident with serious injuries requires an official report. Mom, Jasmine intervened with sweet but condescending voice. We just want to take care of you. That's why we thought it would be best if you moved to a place with specialized medical attention. A home, Charles corrected. A specialized care facility for people going through complicated grief. They have psychologists, nurses, activities to keep you busy. And in the meantime, Henry added, we can take care of selling the house, managing insurance money, all those complicated things you shouldn't have to handle in your current state. There it was, the complete plan. Declare me mentally incompetent, put me in a home, and take control of all my money. First, they'd murdered Ernest for insurance money, and now they wanted to rob me too. And what if I refuse? I asked. Why would you refuse? Charles asked with a smile that chilled me. We just want what's best for you. Because this is my house. This is where I built my life with Ernest. This is where I raised you. Mom, Henry said with an exaggerated sigh, you can't live in the past forever. Dad is gone. You have to accept it and move on. I have accepted it, but that doesn't mean I'm going to give away my life and money. The mask of concern began cracking on my sons' faces. Charles got up abruptly. All right. If you won't listen to reason, we'll have to take more drastic measures. What does that mean? It means we can start a legal process to have you declared mentally incompetent. We have witnesses to your erratic behavior. We have testimony from doctors confirming you're suffering from senile paranoia. Doctors? What doctors? I hadn't spoken to any doctors about my mental state. Dr. Albright already signed a preliminary report, Henry added. He says that based on our descriptions of your behavior, you likely need specialized care. A doctor who'd never examined me had signed a report about my mental state based only on what my sons had told him. How much had it cost them to buy that false evaluation? So you can cooperate voluntarily, Charles continued, or we can do it legally. But either way, you're going to get the help you need. It was a direct threat. If I didn't hand over my money voluntarily, they'd use the legal system to steal it from me. I need time to think about it, I told them, trying to buy time. Of course, Jasmine said with false sweetness, but not too much time. For your own good. After they left, I sat in my kitchen, trembling with rage and fear. My own sons, the blood of my blood, had not only murdered their father but were now planning to steal everything I had left. That night, my phone vibrated with a message longer than others. Margot, this is Stephen Callahan, a private investigator. Ernest hired me 3 weeks before he died because he was suspicious of Charles and Henry. They poisoned him with methanol mixed in his breakfast coffee. I have audio evidence of their conversations planning everything. Tomorrow at 3 p.m., go to the corner cafe. Sit at the back table. I'll be there. At last, I would know who'd been sending those messages, and more importantly, I'd have the proof needed to get justice for my husband's death. But I also knew I didn't have much time. Charles and Henry had shown their hand. If I didn't act fast, I'd end up locked in a home while they spent the money that had cost Ernest his life. The war had begun. And even if I was a 66-year-old woman against 2 ruthless men, I had something they didn't: the truth. And truth, sooner or later, always finds a way to emerge. That night, for the first time since Ernest's death, I smiled because I knew my husband hadn't died in vain. His caution, his instinct, his decision to hire a private investigator would allow me to get justice. Charles and Henry had seriously underestimated their mother. They were about to discover that a woman fighting for the memory of her murdered husband is a force more powerful than all their greed combined. The next day arrived filled with nervousness and anticipation. I dressed carefully, choosing my most serious purple dress, the one I wore for important occasions. If I was going to meet the man who could give me the answers I needed, I wanted to be prepared for any revelation. At 2:30 p.m., I walked toward the corner cafe with determined but cautious steps. Every shadow looked suspicious. Every person on the street could be a spy sent by my sons. The paranoia they'd accused me of was starting to feel justified. The cafe was moderately full. I went straight to the back table as instructed. I ordered chamomile tea and waited, hands trembling slightly on the worn wooden table. Exactly at 3 o'clock, a man in his 50s approached my table. He was tall and gray-haired with intelligent eyes and a serious but kind expression. He carried a brown folder under his arm. "Mrs. Hayes?" he asked in a low voice. I nodded, not yet trusting my voice. "I'm Stephen Callahan. I'm so sorry for your loss." Ernest was a good man. He sat across from me and placed the folder on the table. "Before I show you what I have, I need you to know that what you're about to hear and see will be very painful. Are you ready?" "I've been getting ready since I received your first message," I replied with firmness I didn't know I had. Stephen opened the folder and took out a small voice recorder. "Ernest came to see me a month ago. He was worried about his son's behavior. He hired me to investigate them discreetly." He pressed play. Ernest's voice, so familiar and dear, filled the small space between us. "Stephen, I need you to know that if something happens to me, it won't be an accident. Charles and Henry have been pressuring me to increase my life insurance. Yesterday, Charles brought me papers he said were to better protect Margot. But when I read them, I realized there were also clauses that directly benefited them. My heart raced. Hearing Ernest's voice was like having him back for a few minutes, but his words confirmed my worst suspicions. The recording continued. "Henry has been asking strange questions about my daily routine, what I eat for breakfast, what time I leave the house, if Margot comes to the shop with me. He says it's out of concern, but something about how he asks worries me." Stephen paused the recording. This conversation was 3 weeks before his death, but I have something more recent. He played another recording, this time with Charles's voice in the background talking on the phone. "No, we can't wait any longer. The old man is getting suspicious. Yesterday he asked me why I was so interested in his insurance. Yes, I already have the methanol. It works perfectly because the symptoms look like a heart attack or stroke. No, Mom won't be a problem. After Dad dies, she'll be so devastated we can do whatever we want with her." Tears began rolling down my cheeks. It was my son's voice, my own son, coldly planning his father's murder. "There's more," Stephen said softly. "This recording is from the day before Ernest's death." A new recording began. This time it was Henry talking to someone. "Everything's ready. Tomorrow, Charles is going to put the methanol in Dad's coffee. We told him it was a special vitamin supplement a doctor recommended. The idiot is going to drink it without suspecting anything. The symptoms: it'll start with dizziness and confusion, then loss of sight, convulsions, coma. The doctors will think it's a stroke or heart attack. By the time they realize it's poisoning, it'll be too late. My world completely collapsed. Not only had they planned Ernest's murder, but they'd executed it with coldness that terrified me. How was it possible that my sons, the babies I'd nursed, the boys I'd comforted through their nightmares, were capable of something so monstrous? How did you get these recordings? I asked through my sobs. Ernest asked me to put listening devices in your house, Stephen explained. He was afraid, but he didn't know exactly of what. We placed them on the home phone and in some other strategic spots. He took out a series of photographs from the folder. I also have this Charles buying methanol at a hardware store 30 miles from town. He paid with cash and used a fake name, but I have it on video. The photographs clearly showed Charles leaving a hardware store with a small bottle in his hands. The date on the photos was 5 days before Ernest's death. And this, Stephen continued, showing me more documents. These are Charles and Henry's financial records from the last 6 months. They've been spending far more money than their incomes justify. Charles owes $80,000 to a lender in the city. Henry has gambling debts of $45,000. They were desperate. It all started making sense. It wasn't just greed that motivated Ernest's murder. It was financial desperation. My sons were ruined and saw their father as a source of easy, fast money. Why didn't you go to the police immediately after Ernest's death? I asked. Because Charles and Henry are very smart. They bribed the doctor who attended Ernest at the hospital to change the official diagnosis. Instead of poisoning, the death certificate says heart failure due to complications from a work accident. Without that medical evidence, my recordings might not have been enough for a conviction. But now we have all the evidence together, I said, feeling a mix of pain and determination. Exactly. And there's one more thing you need to know. My blood ran cold. What? Your sons were planning to kill you too. Stephen played one last recording, this time with Charles and Henry's voices together. Once we have Dad's insurance money, we need to get rid of Mom too, Charles said. We can't risk her getting suspicious or anyone else putting ideas in her head. How? Henry asked. The same as with Dad. But this time we can make it look like suicide from depression. A widow who can't live without her husband. Nobody would question it. And since we're her only heirs, everything would be ours. The house, the savings, the insurance money, almost $200,000 total. The recording stopped. I was shaking uncontrollably. My sons had not only murdered their father but were planning to murder me as well. All for money. Mrs. Hayes, Stephen said gently, I know this is devastating, but we have enough evidence to make them pay for what they did. What do we do now? I asked, wiping my tears. First, we need to go to the police with all this evidence. Sergeant O'Connell is an honest man. He's not involved in corruption. Second, we need to act fast. Your sons are planning to have you declared mentally incompetent tomorrow. If they succeed, it will be much harder to proceed legally. Tomorrow? Yes. I intercepted a phone conversation this morning. They're meeting with Judge Miller at 10 a.m. to start the mental incapacitation process. I got up from the table with determination I hadn't felt in weeks. Then we have to act tonight. Exactly, Stephen confirmed. But first, there's one more thing I want to show you. He took one last photograph from the folder. In it, Ernest was leaving a medical clinic I didn't recognize. 3 days before he died, your husband went for a complete medical exam at a clinic in the city. The results show he was perfectly healthy. No signs of heart disease. His blood pressure was normal. Everything was perfect. This definitively proves his death was caused by poisoning, not natural health problems. That was the final piece of evidence we needed. Ernest had been a healthy man, murdered by his own sons. Stephen, I said, taking his hand, thank you for keeping your promise to my husband. Now let's get justice. That same night, Stephen and I went directly to the police station. Sergeant O'Connell was working the night shift that week, which was perfect for our purposes. When we arrived at 8 p.m., the station was relatively quiet. "Sergeant O'Connell," I said in a firm voice, "I need to file a formal complaint for the murder of my husband, Ernest." The sergeant looked at me with surprise. "Murder? Mrs. Hayes? The death certificate says he died from heart complications after a work accident." "The death certificate is false," I replied, placing Stephen's folder on his desk. "My husband was deliberately poisoned with methanol by our own sons." For the next 2 hours, Stephen and I presented all the evidence. The audio recordings, photographs of Charles buying methanol, bank documents showing unauthorized withdrawals, Ernest's medical results proving his perfect health, and finally, the recorded conversations where my sons confessed to both their father's murder and their plans to kill me. Sergeant O'Connell listened to each recording with increasingly serious expression. When we finished, he leaned back in his chair and shook his head in disbelief. "This is monstrous," he murmured. "Are you sure you want to go through with this, Mrs. Hayes? Once we arrest your sons, there's no turning back." "Sergeant," I replied with all the dignity I could muster, "those men murdered my husband in cold blood for money. They were planning to murder me too. They are no longer my sons. They are criminals who must pay for their crimes. We'll need the medical examiner to exhume Ernest's body to confirm the presence of methanol," the sergeant explained. "Are you prepared for that?" "Do whatever is necessary," I replied without hesitation. Sergeant O'Connell immediately called the district attorney. Despite the late hour, the seriousness of the case led the DA to come to the station personally. After reviewing all evidence, he immediately authorized arrest warrants for Charles and Henry. "We'll proceed at dawn," the DA explained. "We need to make sure we have all evidence before they can destroy any additional proof." Stephen walked me home that night. "Are you sure you'll be okay alone?" he asked with concern. "I'll be fine," I replied. "After everything I've discovered, I'm no longer afraid. I have justice on my side." I couldn't sleep that night. I stayed up sitting in the kitchen, looking at photographs of Ernest on the walls. For the first time since his death, I didn't feel only pain. I felt a strange mix of sadness and satisfaction, knowing justice for his murder was coming soon. At 6 a.m. my phone rang. It was Charles. "Mom, you need to come to Henry's house right away. Something terrible has happened." "What happened?" I asked, feigning concern. "It's better if I explain in person. Please come quickly." I knew it was a trap. After hearing the recordings the night before, I knew they were planning to move up their plans to eliminate me. But I also knew the police were already on their way to arrest them. "I'm on my way," I lied. Instead of going to Henry's house, I stayed in my kitchen waiting. At 7:30 a.m., I saw from my window several police cars heading toward my sons' houses in different directions. My phone rang repeatedly for the next hour. First Charles, then Henry, both with increasingly desperate voices asking where I was, but I didn't answer any calls. At 9 a.m., Sergeant O'Connell knocked on my door. "Mrs. Hayes, we've arrested Charles and Henry. They are in police custody, charged with first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder." I felt my legs tremble, but this time it wasn't from fear. It was from relief. "How did they react?" I asked. "Charles denied everything at first, but when we played the recordings for him, he collapsed. Henry tried to escape through his back window. We had to chase him for 6 blocks. That afternoon, Jasmine came to see me. She arrived sobbing, pleading, completely different from the cold, calculating woman I'd known. "Mrs. Hayes, please, you have to drop charges against Charles. He's not bad. He was just desperate because of his debts. This is my fault too. I pressured him to find money." I looked at her without a trace of compassion. "Jasmine, your husband poisoned my husband. He was planning to murder me too. There is no explanation or justification for that." "But we're family," she screamed in desperation. "Think about what this will do to the family." "The family died the day you decided to kill Ernest for money," I replied coldly. "Now please leave my house." 3 days later, The exhumation of Ernest's body was carried out. Lab results confirmed exactly what Stephen had discovered: lethal levels of methanol in his system, enough to cause all the symptoms he'd experienced before his death. The case became a sensation throughout the town. No one could believe that two sons had murdered their own father for money. Local newspapers called it the cruelest crime of the decade. Over the following weeks, more details emerged during investigation. Charles really owed $80,000 to illegal lenders who'd started threatening him with violence. Henry had lost $45,000 in underground gambling dens and was also facing threats. They'd seen Ernest's life insurance money as their only salvation, but their greed had led them to increase policies so dramatically that it aroused their own father's suspicion. We also discovered that the doctor who'd falsified the death certificate had received $10,000 cash from Charles. He was also arrested for obstruction of justice and falsifying official documents. Stephen explained all details of the plan Ernest had made with him. Your husband was smarter than his sons believed. He knew something bad was coming, but he didn't know exactly what. He hired me not only to investigate Charles and Henry, but also to protect you if something happened to him. Did he know they were going to kill him? I asked. Not exactly, Stephen said. But he suspected his life was in danger. That's why we installed recording devices. That's why we documented everything. He wanted to make sure that if something happened to him, the truth would come to light. My Ernest, even in his final days, had been protecting me. He'd anticipated our son's betrayal and taken steps to ensure justice would prevail. The trial was scheduled to begin in 2 months. Both Charles and Henry faced charges of first-degree murder, which in our state carried a sentence of 25 years to life. The day of the trial arrived after 2 months of intense legal preparation. The courtroom was completely full. Reporters from several regional newspapers had come to cover what was already known as the case of the killer sons. The whole town was there. Neighbors, former co-workers of Ernest, even people I barely knew but who wanted to witness this historic moment of justice. I wore my best black dress, the same one I'd worn for our wedding so many years ago, but which now represented mourning and dignity. Stephen accompanied me, sitting by my side throughout the entire process. His presence gave me strength to face what would be the most difficult day of my life. Charles and Henry entered the courtroom in handcuffs, dressed in orange prison jumpsuits. Seeing my sons like that broke my heart one more time, but I no longer felt pity for them. I only felt deep sadness for the moral death they'd chosen long before they physically murdered their father. The prosecutor presented the case with devastating precision. One by one, the recordings were played for the court. The silence was absolute every time Charles and Henry's voices were heard, coldly planning Ernest's murder. When the prosecutor played the recording where they planned to kill me too, several people in the audience gasped in horror. One elderly woman got up and left the courtroom crying. I couldn't blame her. It was difficult to process such cruelty. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the prosecutor said during his opening statement, this is not an ordinary case of family greed. This is a case of cold and calculated premeditation where two men decided to murder the father who'd raised them with love and sacrifice simply because they needed money to pay gambling debts and irresponsible loans. Charles and Henry's lawyers tried to present a defense based on desperate circumstances and external influences, but the evidence was overwhelming. The recordings didn't lie. The bank documents didn't lie. The forensic evidence of methanol in Ernest's body didn't lie. When it was my turn to testify, I walked to the stand with trembling legs but clear mind. I'd been waiting for this moment for months. Mrs. Hayes, the prosecutor asked, can you tell us what your relationship was like with your sons before your husband's murder? I thought I had a good relationship with them, I replied, looking directly at Charles and Henry. I raised them with love. I sacrificed everything for their well-being. Their father worked from sunrise to sunset to give them the best we could. I never imagined that love and sacrifice would become the reason for his murder. At any point, did you suspect they could harm your husband? No. That is the most painful part of all this. I trusted them completely. When they told me Ernest had an accident at his shop, I believed them. When they organized the funeral so quickly, I thought they were being efficient in their grief. I never imagined they were covering up a murder. Charles lowered his head during my testimony. Henry looked at me defiantly, but I saw tears in his eyes. Too late for tears. Too late for regret. The most dramatic moment of the trial came when the prosecutor decided to play the full recording of the conversation where they planned my own murder. Charles's voice filled the courtroom. "Once we have Dad's insurance money, we need to get rid of Mom too. We can't risk her getting suspicious." A murmur of horror swept through the audience. Several people turned to look at me with expressions of disbelief and compassion. "How did you feel when you heard this recording for the first time?" the prosecutor asked. "I realized that I had lost my 2 sons long before I lost my husband," I replied, voice cracking but firm. "The babies I nursed, the children I comforted in their nightmares, had died and been replaced by 2 strangers capable of any cruelty for money." The defense tried to cross-examine me, suggesting maybe I'd misinterpreted my son's intentions, that maybe grief had made me exaggerate evidence, but the recordings spoke for themselves. Stephen also testified, explaining in detail how Ernest had hired him because he was afraid of his own sons. He described every step of the investigation, every piece of evidence collected, every recorded moment that revealed the truth. The medical examiner presented results of the exhumation, confirming lethal presence of methanol in Ernest's body. He explained how this poison acts slowly, causing exactly the symptoms my husband had experienced before he died. After 3 days of devastating testimony, closing arguments arrived. The prosecutor was crushing. "Charles and Henry are not victims of circumstances. They are predators who saw their own parents as financial obstacles to be eliminated. They planned, executed, and covered up Ernest's murder and were planning to do the same to Margot. They don't deserve compassion. They deserve justice." The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they returned, silence in the courtroom was absolute. I could hear the beating of my own heart as the judge read the verdict. In the case of the state versus Charles Hayes and Henry Hayes on the charge of first-degree murder of Ernest Hayes, we find the defendants guilty. The courtroom erupted in murmurs and exclamations. Charles collapsed in his chair, finally comprehending the magnitude of what he'd done. Henry remained rigid, staring straight ahead with no expression. On the charge of conspiracy to commit murder against Margot Hayes, we find the defendants guilty. The judge proceeded immediately to sentencing. "Charles Hayes and Henry Hayes, for the premeditated murder of your father and conspiracy to murder your mother, I sentence you to life in prison without possibility of parole for 30 years. When I heard those words, I felt a gigantic weight lift from my shoulders. Justice. Finally, there was justice for Ernest. After the trial, many people came to hug me and express their support. Doris cried with me, not from sadness but from relief. "Margot, Ernest can rest in peace now," she whispered. That night, I returned to my house, which now felt different. It was no longer a place of pain and betrayal. It was my home again, the place where Ernest and I had been happy for 42 years. Stephen came to visit me a week after the trial. "How do you feel?" he asked. "At peace," I answered honestly. "For the first time since Ernest's death, I sleep soundly. I know he's resting because his death didn't go unpunished." "And the money, the insurance, the savings?" "I donated the life insurance money to a foundation for victims of family crimes," I explained. "That money was stained with blood. I could never have used it. My personal savings are enough to live modestly for the rest of my days." 6 months after the trial, I received a letter in prison mail. It was from Charles. "Mom, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I need you to know that I regret everything. The money, the debts, the desperation, they blinded us. We lost all humanity. Henry and I destroyed the most loving family in the world for $125,000 that we didn't even get to enjoy. Tomorrow I will commit suicide in my cell. I can't live with what we did. Take care, Mom. Tell Dad we're sorry we were such bad sons." I didn't arrive in time to prevent his suicide. Charles was found hanging in his cell the next day. Henry, upon learning of his brother's death, suffered a complete nervous breakdown and was transferred to the prison psychiatric hospital. Today, 2 years after the trial, I live peacefully in my small house. I've converted Ernest's shop into a garden where I grow flowers to take to his grave every Sunday. Stephen has become a close friend, visiting me regularly to make sure I'm okay. Sometimes neighbors ask me if I miss my sons. The answer is complicated. I miss the children they were, but those children died long before Ernest did. The men they became were not my sons. They were strangers who shared my blood, but not my heart. I've learned that true family is not defined by blood, but by love, loyalty, and mutual respect. Ernest was my true family for 42 years. The friends who supported me during the trial are my family now. Justice didn't bring Ernest back, but it gave me peace. And on quiet nights when I sit on the porch where we so often drank coffee together, I swear I can feel his presence, proud of me for being strong enough to do the right thing, even when it meant losing my sons forever. 5 years have passed since that terrible day in the cemetery when I received the first message that changed my life forever. Today I am 71 years old, and my completely white hair reflects all the storms I've faced and overcome. But my eyes, my dear friend Doris tells me, shine with a peace they didn't have before. The house where Ernest and I built our dreams is still my refuge. I've made some improvements with money I had saved. I painted the walls a soft yellow, Ernest's favorite color, and turned his old shop into the most beautiful garden in the neighborhood. Red roses, white carnations, sunflowers that always seek the sun, just as he taught me to do during our most difficult years. Stephen Callahan became more than just the investigator who helped me get justice. He became my chosen family. He comes to visit me every Wednesday afternoon, and we drink coffee on the porch while he tells me stories about his other cases. The foundation I established with the life insurance money has become something bigger than I ever imagined. The Ernest Hayes Foundation for Victims of Family Crimes now helps dozens of families every year who've gone through tragedies similar to mine. We have psychologists, lawyers, and private investigators all working so no other family has to suffer in silence what I suffered. 6 months ago, a 40-year-old woman came to see me. Her name was Eleanor, and she suspected her brother had murdered her mother for the inheritance. Her story was painfully similar to mine. Greedy relatives, pressure to sell properties, strange behavior after the death. The foundation provided her with a private investigator, free legal advice, and psychological support throughout the process. When her brother was convicted of murder 3 months later, Eleanor came to hug me, crying, "Mrs. Hayes, you saved my life. If you hadn't had the courage to report your own sons, I never would have had the courage to report mine." Those are the moments that remind me why all the pain I went through was worth it. Henry is still alive, though he's no longer the same man I knew. After Charles's suicide, his mind completely broke. The doctors say he lives in a constant state of guilt and paranoia, believing Ernest comes to visit him every night to scold him for the murder. I receive letters from him occasionally. They're incoherent, full of desperate apologies and pleas for forgiveness. At first, I read them looking for some trace of the son I raised with such love. But then I realized that reading those letters only reopened wounds that had already healed. Now I keep them unopened in a shoebox. Maybe someday I'll read them. Maybe not. I have the right to protect my peace of mind. My story ended up being bigger than my personal tragedy. It has become a symbol that justice is possible, even when it comes from the most unexpected sources. A 66-year-old widow proved that truth is more powerful than lies, that true love is stronger than betrayal, and that it's never too late to do the right thing. Tomorrow is Wednesday, and Stephen will come for coffee as always. I'll make his favorite pastries and tell him about the thank you letters that arrived this week. Afterward, we'll work together in the garden, planting new flowers for spring. Life goes on, simpler but more authentic than before. I've learned that true family is not about shared blood, but about shared values, mutual respect, and love that never turns into harm. Ernest, wherever you are, I hope you know that I kept the promise I made to you by your grave that terrible day. I found the truth. I sought justice, and I turned our pain into hope for others. Your death was not in vain, my love.